Hold on, kid. We're gonna get you out of here. Help me get him on the truck.
We're moving out.
2,
You
3.
leaving?
Push ahead and take Shuri Castle.
But we're running on empty here.
You'll have a supply
It's not
drop.
bad, okay?
Tomorrow? How the hell are we
Look at me.
supposed to hold out till tomorrow?
Not bad.
This is bullshit. You hear this, Sarge? We ain't getting shit till tomorrow morning.
Intel says Shuri Castle is mostly deserted. Look on the bright side. After this, you boys will probably get relieved and be on the mend.
Yeah? That's what we thought after Peleliu.
Welcome everybody, Josh here, back again with a brand new and special product review. Today we're talking about this, which is Call of Duty World at War on the PlayStation 3, Xbox 360, as well as the Xbox Series S and X through backwards compatibility. Now, as you guys know, I'm a massive fan of the Call of Duty franchise. I've been basically playing these games ever since Call of Duty 2 on the multiplayer modes. I went over to my friend's house and actually played the multiplayer, and they were playing it with their friends, and so that got me into the Call of Duty franchise. And I think that after Call of Duty 4, everybody was looking for something new, unique, and different in terms of the Call of Duty franchise. We wanted something fresh, but also something that felt like home. And what is Call of Duty World at War as a video game? Well, it's about the Pacific Theater. We've got the American side, the Marines, with Private Miller. He's assaulting Okinawa with Sergeant Sullivan, and both Sergeant Sullivan and his team of Marines are leading the charge on these islands. You play through a vast majority of the game in Japan, as well as the Russian side of the game, which is Dmitry Tranko, as well as Viktor Reznov, and both these guys are fighting for the Soviets in terms of their campaigns, with the Russian side of the invasion and trying to fight for survival, along with the Japanese in this game as well, who are also trying to fight for survival as well, but in a much different way, because they're trying to fight for the homeland, which is being invaded by the Americans during World War II, and the Americans are fighting for their freedom due to the fact that this is leading up to a much larger invasion on Europe as well. And in order to do that, they need to take the island of Okinawa first. They also get to go to Stalingrad in World War II. There's a lot of these really cool and infamous, famous battles that are actually experienced in this Call of Duty game. I think that World at War really takes the World War II formula and actually flips it on its head. This is a dark tone to it, and I think that with the Russians, that you actually do get to play as fighting the Nazis and the culmination of the final days of World War II, I think that this game definitely does set itself apart. And I think that one of the things that really does make this game feel real and realistic is the fact that they use a lot of show and don't tell, which is lost in a lot of gaming. There's a lot of these really cool moments in the game where it shows you the brutality of war and shows you what these characters are fighting for, especially with the American side. And a lot of the American side of the conflict features Marines going to and from these different combat scenarios. You get to explore a little bit more of Europe, and I think that's one of the things that makes Call of Duty as a franchise really great, is the fact that you get to explore unique and exotic locations while also getting to battle it out these disaster situations. And I think that this game, while it is a little bit darker in tone, it does have those action heavy events that you do see in other Call of Duty franchise. And that's one of the things I really do like about this game, is that it sets itself apart from the rest of the Call of Duty franchise, where it's not trying to reinvigorate and redo things that they've done before in terms of the Call of Duty franchise. They're trying to do something new, and it's being made by Treyarch and Activision Blizzard. Activision Blizzard at the time gave them 9 months to work on this game. They technically have been working on this for 2 months, but the development cycle is just so that they get the feeling of what type of game that they actually wanted to get in terms of the final rendition of World at War. It's a first-person shooter style narrative, so if you don't like the first-person shooter style narrative of the older Call of Duty games, probably not going to like this game. And I think what really sets this game apart is the fact that even in 2008, while this game isn't revolutionary per se, it definitely borrows a lot from Call of Duty and some of the other first-person shooter games that have come before. It's definitely one of those games that set the bar for what future Call of Duty games and titles should be. And I think that the darker tone really adds to that factor. You've got a lot of instances where in the campaign you're playing as the Marines, you're being invaded by a group of Japanese soldiers, or you're being ambushed by the Nazi soldiers if you're playing as the Russians. And this game has two different stories going on. There's an A and B story, and they work really well together at showing you the horrors of war, what these American soldiers and the Russians are fighting for. And I think that's one of the things that really does make this game pop out a little bit more, is the fact that while you have these really overarching narratives, they really don't cross like you'd see in a typical Call of Duty game, or even games that have come out afterwards. And I think that with Call of Duty World at War, these set pieces are big and grand and grandiose, like they usually are in terms of the action heavy set pieces that really do elevate the Call of Duty franchise to a whole. And I think that's one of the things that I really do like about the Call of Duty franchise as a whole, is that you get to experience these really great set pieces along with a really interesting single player story narrative. And I think that isn't lost in terms of Call of Duty World at War. So I think that the World War II setting in this game works really well compared to that of Call of Duty World War II. I actually do kind of like that game's campaign, even though it's the same tried and true method that we've known before. And maybe I'll review that game soon on this channel as well. But I think that one of the things that makes this game work is the action-heavy focus of it. And there's a lot of really cool weapons that show up in this game, like the MP40s, which is pretty much a classic in terms of when you're playing against a that you can pick up enemy weapons on the ground, as well as utilize the weapons that you're given at the start of the missions. You also get the typical Marine carbine, you get the assault rifles, you get your pistols, you get your shotguns, and you also get the added benefit of a flamethrower in this game. The flamethrower in this game is pretty brutal. You can use it to, when you're assaulting beaches, take out enemy encampments where they're dug into the ground, and these foxholes, and just blast these people away. It's a really fun thing to use, especially in the older Call of Duty games, which a lot of these current generation Call of Duty games, or even the current generation FPS games, really don't feature that weapon at all. There's a lot of really cool vehicles that you pilot, like the aircraft, as well as in multiplayer you get to ride around in a tank. The tank missions in this game feel really fluid and relentless, especially when you get the hang of the tank modes and you actually blast away enemies. It's a really fun experience to have even in a Call of Duty game. One of the really cool missions that you get to experience in this game is you get to be a gunner in the gunner seat and you're being attacked by Japanese Zeros that are flying by. It's a really memorable location in terms of the game, just because you're flying over the Pacific Theater in terms of the map of the game. Now, I did play a lot of the World at War multiplayer when that game originally released. I was actually not able to record any World at War multiplayer for this review just because I don't think those servers exist, and even if they do exist, they're probably filled with hackers and cheaters, so I will not be showing any of the World at War multiplayer in this review. But I think that the single player campaign alone, the fact this has real war footage thrown into a mix of the cutscenes, the fact this is made by Treyarch and did some of the other really great Call of Duty games in the franchise. This is a first-person shooter linear narrative, so if you don't like linear first-person shooters like Call of Duty World at War, you're probably not going to enjoy this game at all. And I think that with Call of Duty World at War, they turn up the situation to 11 and do something, well, basically the same, unique, and different to the campaign itself. And I think that was definitely the case in this game. And I think when it came out in 2008, it was competing against things like Halo 3. A lot of the gameplay mechanics in terms of the multiplayer as well as the single player are borrowed a lot from the Halo franchise, especially the Bungie era of the Halo franchise. And I think that if you're able to play the Halo games like I reviewed on this channel, you should have no problems jumping into Call of Duty World at War. And I think that's the same with all Call of Duty games, just because of the fact that they allow you to jump into both games without having any of a learning curve. Like I said before, I think that the gunplay is fantastic in this. I think that the story-driven narrative is a little bit haunting. You get to see a little bit more of a darker side of the war than you would have if this was just your standard issue Call of Duty game. And I think that this is one of those video game franchises that lives within the people that experienced this game when it first came out, like myself. I think that this is one of those games that's probably going to live on even past my lifetime as being one of the greats in the Call of Duty universe, and I think that it's definitely holds its place amongst gamers. So I think that's one of the reasons why, even at the full price of $20, which it is on the Xbox store, even at buying it at full price, you're definitely get your money's worth in your bank, like I originally paid for it on the PlayStation 3 days when I actually had my physical copy. I went to go look for my physical copy of the game and I couldn't find it here, so I'll have to go around digging for that in the future. But I did have a physical PlayStation 3 copy of the game, and I think it was pretty fun to actually go in the multiplayer modes with my friends. This game also had 2-player co-op, which you can actually explore a single player narrative with a friend or just play the multiplayer modes, which the modes itself are standard issue team deathmatch. You had capture the flag, you had ground war, which is big team battles, you had some other unique features like the prestige mode, like that was featured in Call of Duty 4. And this game borrows a lot of elements from Call of Duty 4 into this. You also have the Nazi Zombies mode, where you're playing through some of the typical Call of Duty maps in the campaign, which are built for the multiplayer mode, which is Nazi Zombies. And I think that even though I didn't really play the Nazi Zombies mode that much, I think that a lot of people really did have a lot of fun with that mode. And maybe in the future, if I can actually get onto a server with a bunch of people playing that game, maybe I'll actually play either on this channel or a different channel that I do have where I post a lot of my gameplay walkthroughs and stuff. But I think that for me personally, I was more interested in the single player story-driven narrative. I'm a huge fan of history. I like the World War II settings. And while this game has a lot of globe-spanning, globe-trotting adventures similar to that of the Call of Duty Modern Warfare franchise, this game does take place heavily in Japan as well as Europe in World War II towards the tail end of that war. And I think that as someone who likes experiencing those types of levels in their games, I think there's nothing they could have done that could have, elevated to the stature that they did in terms of this game. And I think that this game is really great due to the fact they do stuff that is completely different, where they show you what's happening in the war, but they don't actually tell you about it. A lot of this game is show don't tell, and I think that's something that's missing in a lot of first-person shooters nowadays, is the whole show don't tell narrative. And I think that's one of the things that also works really well in this campaign. Also, the thing that really works well is the musical score. This game has haunting music in this, and you actually feel it when you're playing. A lot of this game is about feelings, and I think that the musical score definitely has a lot of that. And I think that the gameplay itself is pretty awesome. It's your standard issue Call of Duty game, but with World War II aesthetic to it. So if you like those types of games, this is definitely one to check out. So with that being the case, that is my opinion over Call of Duty World at War. I think that this game is fantastic. I think that the set pieces in this are grand and epic, kind of like they are in every other Call of Duty game in the franchise. I think that this game in itself is really revolutionary for its time. It's definitely one of those games that influenced a lot of gamers, caused me to want to write stories of my own as well as build worlds as well. I think that it's definitely an influential video game in the franchise, and I think you can't go wrong playing Call of Duty World at War. So let me know in the comment section down below what you guys think of Call of Duty World at War, which game in the Call of Duty Duty franchise is your favorite, which game you hate the most, which game did you love the most, which game do you think is really influential in terms of gaming as a whole. I definitely think that Call of Duty World at War definitely goes up there. The voice actors in this game also do a relatively good job in terms of their roles. Call of Duty has been known to take Hollywood voice actors in their games and actually elevate them to status where they're beyond the other characters that you've seen them play in other big budget movies, and I think that Call of Duty World at War is definitely no exception to that rule. So there's a lot of really cool things about Call of Duty World at War, and I really don't want to spoil the whole story itself, so I definitely recommend that if you want to go check this game out, definitely do so. So as always guys, rate, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace out.
In Berlin, the Germans will truly see what they have unleashed. In the midst of all the blood, the bullets, and the dead, I found that an old friend was still very much alive. Dmitry Kutrenko. I saw this man cheat death, time after time at the siege of Stalingrad. As long as he lives, the heart of this army cannot be broken. He makes us